Yo, what up? It's your boy, the Pentagon here. I wanted to make a quick video about the proper time to sandbag. I was actually going to write some stuff down and kind of did, but I just haven't gotten the opportunity to upload it. I don't even know where it is. This was like a couple weeks ago. And we were in this weird situation where, right before my shift would end, I would get smashed. Like, that's exactly the time where all the kids would get off with the school bus, I guess, and their parents would pick them up in their cars and they would rush over to my restaurant to harass me. And the tickets would come spitting out of the machine, and nobody's going to slide over to help you because that's just not how this restaurant works. Some restaurants are like that and people will jump over to give you a hand. At this restaurant, you're just kind of sitting out there by yourself. And so I was getting smashed at this place, and I was just like, man, you know what? I'm going to have to sandbag. And I hadn't sandbagged at this place up until that point because I'm just trying to like figure out everything. And sandbagging is a slang term that we use in the industry, the restaurant industry, for just, making extra. So at this one place I used to work, if we had a wine dinner, we would go ahead and we would cook like a bunch of different steaks at one time. Because all the food's going to go out to all the tables at the same time. So we've got, maybe 40 people sitting out there and we can't cook steaks to order. So we would limit the temps that people could order steaks at. So you can only order them at medium or at medium well. Okay, so at the beginning of the shift, before anybody shows up, we'd go ahead and we'd cook steaks off, 30, 40 steaks off to rare. And we'd stick them in the hot box, right? And then we would let those steaks sit in the hot box until it was time to order. And so they're already, medium rare, maybe close to medium. And so all that we got to do is take those steaks out and put them back on the grill and bring them up. Steaks are rare at like 100 and I think it was 135, 140, something like that. So we take them out of the hot box and we cook them up, 10 degrees, 15 degrees to like medium. I guess steaks are well done at 160. I got to go back and check the numbers on that, but I think steaks are well done at like 160. So they're medium at like 145. So we're bringing them up, maybe 10 degrees, and just kind of getting some just extra heat on them. And then sending them out to the tables, and 2 guys would jump over and plate up the steaks. Maybe 3 guys would jump over and plate up the steaks all at one time. We also on Saute was getting hit Friday night, Saturday night. So with one person running that entire station, it would be kind of chaotic. And what you would do would be, to cook, 3 or 4 orders of mushrooms, sauteed mushrooms, and one big skillet, and use that as your backup. So if you get into a point where you're just getting smashed and you don't have time to cook that to order, what you would go ahead and do is pull, that down and use that. But one of the problems I think that we were having at that restaurant in particular, I didn't have it because, I went to school, American Culinary Federation certified. But one of the problems that we were having with some of the people there is that they would overcook the food. This guy, he would take 3 or 4 orders of sauteed mushrooms and put them up on top of the oven and then just let it sit there. Every time an order would come up, he would just pull that down and put the heat on it, and then he would serve that to the guest, and then he would take more uncooked mushrooms and throw it in the pot and then let that cook for 2 minutes with the old mushrooms and then put it back on top of the stove. And there's some issues with quality there, especially when you're talking about a fine dining restaurant, is you got overcooked mushrooms sitting in there with undercooked mushrooms. So it's not consistent for one. And for two, what temperature is that sitting up there at? Because if it's not between, if it's not above 135 degrees or if it's not under 41 degrees, you've got some issues with time temperature abuse. But there's also some issues with just the quality of the ingredients. What you're going to learn is that food, and you're sometimes going to hear this at decent restaurants, is that food's always going to be better when it's fresh. Okay, that's absolutely true. But when you're in the middle of a rush, you don't have time to make everything from scratch fresh. And so sandbagging really does help But I think a better alternative to having just a pan of stuff already cooked, like this is a buffet or something like that, would be to cook 2 or 3 orders of whatever it is that you have, and then to try to get rid of it before, let's say, half the shift is over with. There's some guidelines to be considered when you're holding food at above 135 degrees. I think the time is like 4 hours or something like that, that you can hold food at that temperature. So let's say half a shift. Okay, your shift's about 8 hours, 9 hours. You can hold that. You can have a plate of backups there for round a shift. So towards the end of that shift, you just go ahead and get rid of whatever backups you have. Just go ahead and sell that. But if you want to be really careful, I mean, why not just get rid of it halfway through the shift? Because it's just not going to be as good, right? You know what food looks like after it's been held in the hot box for, I don't even think it's 8 hours. I think it's like 4 hours. So halfway through the shift, you just make sure that you're out of your sandbags. And then you go ahead and you make some fresh sandbags. Yeah. I guess there's also some issues with it drying out. I think if it comes with a sauce, you can hit that, and maybe if it comes with stock, you can go ahead and add some stock to it, and you can rehydrate that. If it comes with a sauce, the sauce is going to kind of cover it up. But also, you don't have to cook it all the way, because if you cook it all the way, you've got some issues with it breaking down more when you reheat it. Now it's going to be overcooked. What I do sometimes is I'll cook whatever it is halfway, so that way when an order comes in for it, instead of taking 8 minutes for it to cook, it'll just take 4 minutes. I used to work at a different station, and we had trout, and we could go through a case of trout in a shift. That's how busy we were. On a Friday night, a Saturday night, we go through a case of trout. So I'd clean an entire case, and at the end of the shift, we had no trout left. And that was insane. But we would take like a half a sheet pan, and we would, I would sear off like 5 or 6 trout. I would bread them and sear off like 5 or 6 trout, and then just put them there and put that in the cooler. And I would make trout to order. But whenever, somebody would order 5 trout at one time, and I'd still be getting orders in for other things, I would just go ahead and use my backups. I'd be like, okay, well, I got 5 trout already in my sandbag, so I'm just going to go ahead and finish cooking these and put that on the plate and then rock it. And so it's not overcooked because it was only halfway cooked to begin with. And that could work the same way with mushrooms or steaks or whatever. You just cook them halfway. And that way, whenever you get into the weeds, which is another slang term that we use, mosquitoes, for when you're just really backed up, you could go ahead and finish cooking them off in, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, and plate them. And, yeah, so dehydration, time temperature abuse, those are some things to worry about. You can talk maybe a little bit, we could bring up an issue with oxidation, or the effects that the cooler or the hot box or whatever would have on the texture when we're leaving foods in the hot well. We have like a steam well at the place I work now. You'll start to see the proteins inside of the sauces start to coagulate a little bit, and the carbohydrates that are inside of it start to brown. And the proteins, and it's all starting to brown, and so the sauce was very yellow when you put it in there, and now it's kind of brown, and so you add a little bit of cream to it to just kind of like bring it back a little bit to freshen it up. But that's something that has to be thought about. But you also have freezer burn, and if you leave something in the cooler that's uncovered, you notice that it starts to kind of dry out. Those are all things to be concerned with. Oxidation, a good example of that would be like, when you peel apples, and you just kind of leave them at room temperature. You peel potatoes and leave them at room temperature, you're going to notice that they start to turn brown. That's because there's something called, I think they call them free radicals, that are floating around, which are like these molecules that lack electrons, and so they're looking to take electrons from other things. And what they'll do is they'll fly in to your potatoes, and they'll take the electrons from the molecules that are inside of your potatoes. And when those molecules become unstable, they start to break down into more stable, smaller molecules, right? And that's what decomposition is. And so you've got some issues with that, because those sandbag items are sitting open, exposed to the air, and now the radicals are stealing their electrons and they're starting to decompose, and so it's affecting the texture of it. And I guess when you're talking like apples or you're talking potatoes, you can put them in water with salt, or you can put them in water with lemon or some kind of an acid, and that acts as kind of a barrier to keep those free radicals from taking the oxidation. But if you wrap those sandbags up with plastic or whatever foil, it also kind of prevents those things from getting to them, and prevents the decomposition. I think those are some of the big issues to be concerned with: overcooking, undercooking. Yeah. I think that's it. If there's anything else, I'll try to upload it. Or if you guys have questions, we'll go ahead and go over that. But that's the proper way to sandbag, or the best time to sandbag. But usually, it depends on how busy the restaurant is. I only cook like 2 or 3 orders of backups. Sometimes more, just depending. It wasn't uncommon to get 5 orders of trout where I was working at. And at the place now, we have chicken Alfredo, and that's one of the things that I'll try to sandbag. But the rushes aren't usually too bad, so making like an extra 1 order of chicken Alfredo usually helps. Yeah, but sometimes I don't even have to do that. I haven't done that in like a couple of weeks, and I've been okay. So you just got to feel it out, and you get better at that as you get more experienced. So that's sandbagging, I guess, 101.